Okay, we are live. I want to thank everyone for being here for another Whale Sanctuary Project live webinar from our live series. This one is a very special one because we are going to be talking about sanctuaries, but not just from the point of view of sanctuaries for dolphins and whales, but sanctuaries for all animals. And we're going to be looking at the similarities and the differences that run across all of them. And I have some amazing guests for you today. Let me just give you a bit of an introduction, and then I will introduce our two guests. As you know, sanctuaries are for wildlife really the only compassionate alternative to zoos and aquariums, circuses, and all the harms that go with that. And there have been sanctuaries for elephants and primates and big cats and other animals for a while now, not as many as there needs to be, but for a while now. And now sanctuaries for cetaceans are joining this movement and becoming the clear alternative to life in the concrete tanks. So in this webinar, we're going to explore the global movement of wildlife sanctuaries with two guests who represent a number of different wildlife taxa. So my first guest is Catherine Doyle, and Catherine is the Director of Science, Research, and Advocacy for the Performing Animal Welfare Society. Catherine has an MS and PAWS operates 3 different sanctuaries in California, including the 2,300-acre ARC 2000 Natural Habitat Refuge. And this is for rescue bears and elephants and big cats. Catherine has worked on behalf of elephants and other captive wildlife for nearly 20 years, and she conducts public policy work focused on protecting captive wildlife, and she leads a number of research efforts at PAWS, so I hope we can get to talk about that. Catherine writes about elephants and the ethics of captivity and captive wildlife sanctuaries, and she also serves on the steering committee for the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance and our advisory board for the Whale Sanctuary Project, which we're very proud to have her. And Catherine also organizes PAWS's biennial international captive wildlife conferences. And I have to tell you, those conferences are phenomenal. And I've been so lucky to attend them and present at them. So Catherine Doyle, thank you very much. Now, our next guest is Noelle Amrud. And Noelle is the director of the Cleveland Armory Black Beauty Ranch. We are so grateful to have Noelle with us. Unfortunately, Mary Lee Jensfold with the Fauna Foundation had an emergency and could not join us today. And Noelle graciously responded to our request for her to step in and join our webinar today. So thank you so much, Noelle. Noelle, as I mentioned, is the director of the Cleveland Armory Black Beauty Ranch. And this is one of the largest and most diverse animal sanctuaries in the country. In this role, she develops and implements long-range plans, oversees strategic development, and enhances outreach and programming. With about 800 animals in over 40 different species, Noelle also ensures that the animals and staff have what they need to thrive. She spent many years as director of animal care for a large rehab center in Central Texas and serves on the steering committee of NAPSA, the North American Primates Sanctuary Alliance. She's also vice president of the board of directors for the Oklahoma Primate Sanctuary and has served as the chair of the steering committee for the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance and was also recently asked to join the newly formed Bear Alliance. So maybe we could find out a little bit more about that. So thank you very much, Noelle, for joining us. I'm Lori Marino, and I am the president and founder of the Whale Sanctuary Project. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and I'm very happy to talk to you today about some of the progress we've made at the Whale Sanctuary Project as well. So what we're going to do is start with some very brief presentations by each of us to familiarize you with the sanctuaries that we work at or are creating. And so we're going to do that and then launch into a discussion of a number of topics. Finally, we're going to leave enough time at the end to answer your questions. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Catherine Doyle to share her screen to give us a brief introduction to PAWS.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to just, as Lori said, brief introduction to our work, our sanctuary, and you'll meet some of our animals here. So just first, a couple of beautiful photos to look at. This is part of our African elephant habitat. Another kind of broader view. This is also all of our, well, so you don't even see the entire area, but these are our elephant habitat areas as well. So just, you get the idea. It's really quite an amazing place. So PAWS was founded in 1984 by co-founders Ed Stewart and the late Pat Derby, and in order to rescue captive wild animals and provide sanctuary for them for life. And this also, many of the animals originally and still come from entertainment backgrounds and also the exotic pet trade. We have 3 sanctuaries in California, including the pictures that you've been seeing, the 2,300-acre Natural Habitat ARC 2000 sanctuary. And really, the idea behind the sanctuary was to create a new way of caring for captive wildlife. So, and that's why what you see at the sanctuary, these dynamic, expansive environments that give the animals greater autonomy. They're able to engage in more natural behaviors. The enclosures are filled with trees, grass, natural vegetation, that do allow for foraging, exploration, etc. Also, these environments in conjunction with the care that we provide, offer rehabilitation, which I think is something that we're going to touch on a little bit later. We are a true sanctuary, which means that we do not buy, sell, breed, trade our animals. There's no public contact with them. And our focus really is on the individual animal for the sake of that animal only. They're not ambassadors, for their species, for example. So of course, advocacy is really important to us, and it's a large part of the work that we do, as well as educating the public. So I'm going to go over just some of our, the animals that we have here, but also, where they've come from. So we have 8 elephants. 5 of them are female African elephants, who you see here, and they've all come from zoos. And again, I think we're going to get more in depth on these issues later. Though I did want to talk a little bit about Maggie. She was the only elephant in Alaska before coming to PAWS. So of course she was indoors most of the time. She was standing on concrete, which just destroys elephants' feet and joints. And in one attempt to try to keep Maggie there, the photo that you see kind of in the middle was the zoo built a $100,000 treadmill for Maggie to exercise her, and she never used it. So now Maggie, of course, is roaming those expansive habitats that you've seen in these pictures. Nicholas, we also have elephants from circuses. So here's Nicholas, who was born into the circus. And you can see the photos of him there when he was made to perform. But by about 4 to 5 years old, he was considered to be unmanageable. He was too dangerous, too strong. And he was essentially, and this isn't just happening to him, this happens to, especially with bull elephants, he was just warehoused. He would have just been living in a dark barn for the rest of his life. And fortunately, we were able to bring him to PAWS. Two of our other elephants from circuses too. This is Prince, who actually was born at the Oregon Zoo, and before he was 2 years old, sent to the circus. And on the right is Gypsy, who spent more than 40 years in circuses, and she was shuttled between, I think, about at least a half dozen different shows. We also have 14 big cats, all of them tigers, except for our African lioness Kamba. And I want to talk a little bit about Munger and, well, actually, and the problem of big cat breeding in this country right now. And it's something actually Noelle and I work together on. And what's happening is, well, big cats are being bred, especially tigers, for entertainment purposes, especially for cub petting. And really, the people breeding them they don't care about genetics. They don't care about the welfare of the animals. So what you have is a lot of inbreeding. And so Munger here is an example of what happens with these cats who end up suffering these lifelong conditions due to inbreeding. As you can see, he's blind in one eye. He has mobility issues with his back legs. And in fact, we even have to cut his food into smaller pieces because he has trouble chewing. Despite all this, he's actually a pretty happy tiger, and he's doing really great at the sanctuary. Kim and Roy, actually there's a third, who's not in the picture, Claire. There are three siblings who actually would have been someone's exotic pet had they not instead come to PAWS. We also have 4 bears, again, who are living in these expansive habitats filled with natural vegetation. And so, for example, bears can forage. They can forage, especially in the fall. They're foraging for acorns, because we have oak forests there, basically. So anyway, Ben came from a roadside zoo where he was basically living in a dog run. It was concrete. There was nothing natural for him. He was, pacing back and forth. And it was really thanks to Animal Legal Defense Fund and PETA, who filed a lawsuit on his behalf, and they were able to free him, and we were able to bring him to PAWS. And as you see, there's these similar issues between the different species, but pet trade again. So Winston was actually bought at a flea market to be a real life teddy bear for someone's daughter. And and of course, what happens with these animals, sometimes we have one other bear actually who was chained in the backyard and they never removed the chain, which grew into his neck and had to be surgically removed. But with Winston, fortunately, he was confiscated and was, brought to PAWS. So that's my quick overview, and I guess I'll hand it back to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. Noelle, would you like to share with us?
Sure. Let's see, just a second. So, well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I'm always happy to talk about our sanctuary. My name is Noelle Almred. I'm the director of the Cleveland Amory Black Beauty Ranch in Murchison, Texas. We are in northeast Texas, about an hour and a half southeast of Dallas. Just a little bit of background about us. We were founded in 1979 by Cleveland Amory, who was an author and animal advocate. He started our parent organization, the Fund for Animals, back in the 60s. He started the sanctuary in 79 because he heard about the Bureau of Land Management set to exterminate donkeys in the Grand Canyon because they were overbreeding, and the BLM said, well, the only way to fix this is to exterminate these donkeys. Cleveland said absolutely not, and he organized a rescue over 2 years where they individually airlifted 577 donkeys out of the Grand Canyon one by one without a single injury, accident, or death. Those donkeys that were not adopted were brought to our sanctuary in Texas in 1979. We started off on 80 acres. We're now on over 1,400 acres with over 800 animals currently. And over the years, we've taken in other animals too. This is a photo of Nim Chimsky, who was a chimpanzee used in a sign language experiment. He was the first of several chimps that came to live at Black Beauty. And then over the years, we've taken in numerous species of animals that had no other place to go. We merged with the Humane Society of the United States in 2005. We are officially an affiliate of HSUS. We are an accredited sanctuary by GFAS, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, as is PAWS. We are a member of the North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance, and like PAWS, we are founding members of the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance. And these alliances work together. They're a collection of reputable sanctuaries, and we speak as a unified voice against the issues that affect the animals that we care for. Theoretically, a unified voice is going to be stronger than each individual sanctuary speaking out. So these alliances were founded to not only strengthen our sanctuary community, but also help speak for the animals as well. Our mission is to provide a lifelong safe haven for animals who have been rescued from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The book Black Beauty was instrumental in shaping Cleveland Amory's life, and he named the sanctuary Black Beauty, obviously, because we started off taking equine. But this sentence at the very end of the book kind of sums up why most of us are in the sanctuary business. Animals that come to reputable sanctuaries, they have nothing to fear, and here my story ends. My troubles are all over and I am at home. And we have this posted everywhere, on our t-shirts, on our front gate. It's kind of our mantra, and that's our duty to every animal that we take in. I'm just proud that I got through it without choking up, because I usually end up choking up when I have to read that quote. So what brings animals to Black Beauty? We have numerous animals that have been rescued from hunting ranches, canned hunting ranches specifically, that have been seized by law enforcement. We have several species of non-human primates that have been retired from biomedical research or the exotic pet trade. We have bears that have been retired from entertainment, circuses, and traveling shows. Many horses and donkeys and mules that have been rescued from cruelty and neglect, horse slaughter, the primarin industry, which if you're not familiar with that, is a hormone menopausal replacement that they actually use pregnant mare urine, hence the name primarin. And so these animals are kept stalled and catheterized their whole lives. HSUS was instrumental in getting some of these factories shut down in the United States, and we took in the animals when they needed a place to go. We have many species of farmed animals that have been rescued from factory farming industries or cruelty and neglect, and big cats as well, rescued from the exotic pet industry and roadside zoos. And so our goal for these animals is to provide them, like Catherine was saying, the most expansive, large natural habitat that we can possibly provide. And so we are currently developing primate habitats. This is a architect's rendering. We're about halfway through with this project, where it will offer, these are large half-acre naturally wooded habitats that monkeys can live in family groups as they would in the wild. They can forage, climb trees, root for insects, whatever, you name it. And so these are some pictures, and we've finished this phase, and so now we have monkeys living in these habitats, and we're just thrilled. So they're just naturally wooded, and they basically can live their lives with as little interference from us as possible. That's our goal. And it's amazing to see the transformation when these animals come to us. And we're also doing the same thing for our big cats and bears. We have this existing big cat habitat, which are multi-acre habitats for our big cats and our bears. And then we finish this multi-acre habitat for new bears and tigers that are coming in this fall. So that's kind of a summary of us. So thank you again for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Both really impressive efforts. I'll just join in very briefly to give everyone a little bit of a background and an update on the Whale Sanctuary Project. As you know, we are a US-based nonprofit organization that began in 2016 in response to the growing evidence that dolphins and whales do quite poorly in concrete tanks. And we looked around and thought, well, we took our inspiration from efforts like PAWS and Black Beauty and other legitimate sanctuaries, Fauna Foundation, and said, well, why not for dolphins and whales as well? And so I'll talk a little bit later about what we're doing and what some others are doing. We have a fantastic, what I call the dream team. Our executive director is Charles Vinnick, who is with the Free Keiko, the Keiko project. And we have 5 members on our board and over 50 expert advisors. Catherine is one of them. Ed Stewart is another. And we just pretty much have an incredible level of expertise on our advisory team. So we spent a couple of years searching for a site for a permanent sanctuary on both the west and east coast of North America. And our mission is really to establish a permanent seaside sanctuary where captive cetaceans can live in an environment that maximizes well-being and autonomy and is as close as possible to their natural habitat. And so I think you see a lot of the same words being used by all of us that represents the kinds of factors that are really important in an authentic sanctuary. And after about 2.5 years of searching for a site, we announced our choice this year, in February 2020, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, there were a couple of really interesting elements to the site criteria. And what we found that there are actually 2 important dimensions to finding the proper site for a sanctuary. One is physical, the other is social. So on the physical side, a water space with enough space and depth, good flow, no pollution, no significant noise, protection from storms, no surface ice because the animals have to come to the surface to breathe, and some infrastructure there so that there are utilities and roads and so forth. And all of that is critically important. But the other element that we discovered is just as important is the social element. That is siting the sanctuary where there's a nearby community that embraces the project. It's very, very important that the people living around the site want this project to be in their backyard. And I'll tell you more about that. That also there's no significant negative impact on fishers and other livelihoods, and no negative impact on wildlife as well. So all of these elements came together, and we found a wonderful site on the eastern coast of Nova Scotia. So this is a map of Nova Scotia. Here's Halifax, and if you go about 2 hours east of Halifax, you get to Port Hilford, Nova Scotia. That's our site. And Port Hilford, the nearby town is Sherbrooke, a beautiful town of people who have, I would have to say, are making all of this possible for us. So here's a close-up view of Port Hilford. It's a big, beautiful, expansive bay. It has protection from storms. We are going to be on this side of the port. We have not decided yet exactly, in terms of, and with the permitting agencies, exactly what the configuration will be, but it will be us on this side of the port. And this is an actual picture of Port Hilford. It's gorgeous. There's a beautiful beach at the head of the port. And then further down, we will have our sanctuary for whales. Now, this sanctuary is going to be at least 100 acres. That is at least 300 times the size of the largest tank at any marine park. We will have an extensive area with a range of depths between 12 to 16 meters. There are no fish farms or other forms of pollution near it. there's good flow and good protection from storms. We've already seen that in 2 hurricanes, the one last year and the one last week, that this is a very well-protected bay, and that's a good thing. And we have Sherbrooke, and Sherbrooke, again, is a wonderful community, small community of people who live adjacent to Port Hilford. And these people have literally adopted this program, and we have fallen in love with them. And so this is the element that really made the difference. Port Hilford is a beautiful bay that fits all the physical criteria, and Sherbrooke sealed the deal because they were so welcoming, and we look forward to working with them. Now, we plan to have beluga whales and or orcas in our facility, 6 to 8 beluga whales, 2 to 3 orcas, and that's pretty much how we've worked out the carrying capacity for a 100-acre site. We will have a full-service vet facility, quarantine and med pools. We will be able to bring fish in from local fishers, hopefully, to feed the animals. And it'll be very exciting because we'll be able to do a lot of education and outreach. So some of the forms of education and outreach that we will be doing, we hope will have a tremendous social impact, because as you all know, sanctuaries are not just about the individuals who come to live in the sanctuary. It's about a global movement, a social movement, to see sanctuaries as the answer to the kinds of forms of captivity that, you know, animals endure right now: circuses, zoos, marine parks, laboratories, etc. We will have an interpretive center. We will have a remote webcam that will allow people to see the animals all times, and it won't be invasive at all. So people in a museum or people at SeaWorld or anywhere in a classroom can come to know our residents. We will have nature walks where people can see the residents from a distance, not up close, because in real life, you would not be able to get up close to an orca or a beluga. We will have internship programs for pre-vet students in the Maritimes and elsewhere, and we will be doing a lot of great community outreach. And we already have done a lot of that in Sherbrooke. Right now, we are engaged in the permitting process, designing, and also the accreditation process. And that is something that's very interesting, because we'll talk about that. We've talked about authentic sanctuaries. Well, there really are no actual accreditation guidelines for cetacean sanctuaries because there haven't been any up to now. So we are working with others to create accreditation guidelines. And that allows us to, I think Noel said, speak as one voice for the integrity and the authenticity of sanctuaries for all wild animals, not just dolphins and whales. So that's a little bit of what we've been up to. And I think at this point, I know I'm anxious to get into some of our discussion topics. I think it might be important to really start off with, what is the problem? Why can't large social mammals, highly intelligent mammals, thrive in zoos and marine parks? We know why they can't thrive in circuses, but why not in zoos and marine parks? What is it that they're missing? Are they missing anything? And what brought about the need for authentic sanctuaries? Catherine, I'll start with you.
Actually, I think I always look at animals' capabilities and how the environment they're living in limits or allows them to fulfill themselves really as the individuals that they are. So I think, for example, there's always a lot of discussion in zoos about that it's not, how much space, it's the quality of the space. Well, I argue that it's both. I think you do need, especially for large mammals, say, for example, elephants, well, and orcas too. I mean, if you're talking about these animals that naturally are, constantly on the move, right? Constantly, in motion, both in constantly, occupied, their minds are occupied, there's challenges, they're these highly intelligent animals that when they are in, I would say, like a static environment, that, Bob Jacobs, his article that came out today that you are also involved in, Lori, you can speak to that more, but yeah, I mean, this article that came out today, it talks about how it changes the brain. And that's something I've actually been interested in too, because just this idea, that elephants, for example, have this, this suite of this, broad range of communications, right, of vocalizations, and do you start to lose your voice? Do you start to lose, some of these the messages that you maybe you don't need to use anymore, or or what starts to happen with these animals? Do their lives then just kind of their internal lives as well. I'm not just talking externally or physically, but do their lives get smaller and smaller and smaller? So.
Yes, exactly. Noelle?
I think you guys have summed it up. Anytime you're going to take an animal out of their natural habitat, you can't expect, it's just not natural for them. They should be doing what they would normally do in the wild. And I think sanctuaries, reputable sanctuaries, I think, are trying to do whatever we can to get as close to that natural habitat as possible. However, we can give a tiger a 3-acre habitat, which we have, but it's still not going to be as good as their 50-acre or 50-mile territory that they would have in the wild. So at least with sanctuaries, we do the best that we can to give them the natural space, but even we recognize that it's not the same. But of course, it's still better than where they came from.
But that's a really good point, because sanctuaries are still captivity.
Yes.
But it is captivity with a different priority. The way I like to look at it is, in zoos and aquariums, it's not that people don't want these animals to do well, they do, but it's the whole system. The business model is not set up to make the welfare of the animals a priority. Otherwise, you go out of business. But in a sanctuary, you can make the welfare of the animals a priority. So you keep pushing to get them as much of what they need as a species to thrive. And sometimes that means, and often that means, you can't do things like let people ride on them and all kinds of things that are done in zoos and aquariums and so forth. You have to give them their autonomy and their privacy. And in a sanctuary, an authentic sanctuary, you can do that. So that's really one of the differences. Anyone else have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say too is sanctuaries we are providing a consistency in these animals' lives and I think that's one big difference. Of course, it's a philosophical well, I think it's more than philosophical, but when the difference between other captive facilities and sanctuaries, for example, sanctuaries don't breed animals. So that means, say an animal, it could be a big cat, could be an elephant who's in a zoo, is actually managed more like as a group, or there's a lot of talk in terms of species and protecting the species versus we look at the welfare of the individual. So for example, in a zoo, an elephant or any animal might be separated from their social group or their partner to be sent somewhere else for any number of reasons. It could be for breeding, it could be for some sort of management purposes. I don't, maybe there's just too many of that animal in that facility, and so they're going to get moved somewhere else. And again, for us, it comes back to the welfare of the individual. And like I said, I said earlier, it's like they're not ambassadors for their species. They're not, trying to, I don't know. Well, we're not trying to change behavior. Well, we are trying to change behavior in that we would, prefer that wild animals not be in captivity. But again, one of the differences I think with zoos as well is that they're looking to change right now, I mean, all the talk, right, is about conservation, and they're looking to change people's behaviors, which would be a good thing, to be more interested and supportive of conservation. But but when that's your kind of goal, I mean, that's not about the individual animal that's in your facility. That's about changing human behavior. So again, very different, missions, really very different purposes that we have when caring for captive wildlife.
Yes, yes, I would agree. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what an authentic sanctuary is. And I sort of think of this as a public service because, so many people tell me, I went to this country or that city or this place, and I went to the fill in the blank sanctuary, and I swam with the dolphins, or I took a picture with a baby tiger, or you name it. And they rattle off all these experiences that are, of course, attractive to people. But in my mind, I'm saying, this is not a sanctuary, this is a zoo. So can we talk a little bit about the difference and maybe tell our audience how they can discern the difference between an authentic sanctuary and a commercial facility like a zoo or entertainment park? Maybe Noelle?
Okay. And I think Catherine touched on it in her presentation. A reputable sanctuary does not breed. They do not buy, sell, trade, use their animals for any purpose. Animals at true sanctuaries do not have jobs. They are not there to entertain anyone. They're not there to bring in revenue. Reputable sanctuaries are nonprofit. And you could also go so far as to say that they are an accredited sanctuary. I think the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries has come about for that very reason, to help differentiate between a true and pseudo sanctuary. And I know that the NAPSA website, which I'll have to get the link, they have a position statement on pseudo sanctuaries. I'm not sure, Catherine, if BCSA does as well. I can't remember, but you can go to those pages and find some true definitions as well too.
Yeah, and GFAS has a good definition, for truth.
Mm-hmm. Which is, theirs is sanctuaryfederation.org. I know theirs.
And pretty much if you're going to a place that says that they're a sanctuary and they're allowing direct contact with their animals, it's not a sanctuary.
Right.
In fact, I was just looking up a sanctuary recently, was a name I wasn't familiar with, and that says, well, actually, in the way I found it is because they're applying for a permit to purchase some big cats. And if you read their website, it says they're taking in non-releasable wildlife. And yeah, I mean, and yet they are buying. I don't remember if they skip the word that they don't buy and when they talk about, who they are as a sanctuary, but certainly right now they are buying these cats. So it's a matter of really doing your research too, and really just kind of not taking things at face value. And again, there are certain, if usually too, I would say if there are a lot of babies coming through there.
If there are babies, breeding.
Because they're either breeding or they're buying them. And yeah, those are, you just have to kind of look for these red flags.
Exactly, that's a good way of putting it, red flags. It's not just what they call themselves, it's what they actually do. I'd like to talk a little bit about relationships with commercial facilities. And, what is this about? Is this about, making sure that zoos and aquariums go out of business? Or is it about providing a way forward in terms of improving our relationship with the other animals? And how does your facility relate to places that keep animals that are not sanctuaries?
I can go first. I mean,
Okay.
we do not have an official position on zoos or animal organizations that are accredited. So like AZA facilities, we do not have an official statement. And so we are not, it's not in our position to judge or to critique them as well. I think there needs to be, in my personal opinion, I think there needs to be open communication with different types of facilities, because hopefully when you know better, you do better. And I know that we work with, through BCSA and NAPSA, we work with other sanctuaries that are just starting or trying to improve themselves, and we try to work collaboratively together to help each other out. And so I would like to see more of that within the AZA community. I see too much of zoos looking down on sanctuaries thinking that we're not as good as they are, and sanctuaries looking down on zoos thinking that all they're doing is exploiting their animals. And I think that there's a lot of middle ground with, certain sanctuaries and certain zoos. So I think it's hard to paint them all with the same brush. And that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Catherine?
No, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, we have people in the zoo and aquarium industry on our advisory committee, and we want to work with them, not work against them, because there's a tremendous amount of expertise that comes from, zoos and aquaria and other places like that, and the people that work with the animals, I think, genuinely care for them. So, this is all about, finding a way to move the needle, right? The cultural needle of saying, okay, we have these animals that we want to see or put on display, and how can we all work together to move things in the right direction for them, so that, because they're not display products, they're sentient living beings that have their own lives to live. People about who these animals are without also exploiting them. And I think that's the real challenge here, right? It's the question of how we can move from, move to a more respectful relationship with other animals. And I think that helps promote respect for the environments for the animals as well. So you start to see, oh, this animal needs this kind of environment to survive, to thrive. And that sends the message, I better protect the environment for the free-ranging counterparts, not just the residents of the sanctuary. So it really just has tremendous scope. Well, we have, so many questions. I think one of the questions we have is from Kimberly, and she asked, what are the challenges of bringing different animals together in sanctuary spaces? I know they are strangers to each other. They may have been traumatized. How do you handle these challenges? Catherine?
Okay, I can start with that. Especially, talking about elephants. I mean, you have, if you want to talk about trauma, you have many of our elephants. I think, well, we just have 3 captive born out of the 8. So they were actually free living elephants living with their families, who in Africa, for example, probably saw their mothers and their families, gunned down and killed. And then the calves were captured and, sent to the U.S. So you do have, so you do have individuals who are, who've undergone this trauma, who are really, are damaged. And then even for those born in captivity, they're being born into these dysfunctional social groups. So, because I think a lot of times that people think that, especially with elephants, because they're highly social, they live in family groups. So you send them to a sanctuary and they're all going to live together and be very happy. And the truth is, they're all individuals with their likes and dislikes and their own histories and their own backgrounds, which is going to come into play. So what we do at PAWS is we listen to what the elephants tell us, that we're going to work to try to bring them, together. We, like to have, if they want to be together, and if that works out, we could do that, we will do it. But however, there are instances where, say one animal makes it very clear that they are not comfortable with another animal. And the one thing we want our animals to do at the sanctuary, and it's really important, I think, to their rehabilitation, is to be able to relax and to get away from those stresses, because formerly they were in close confinement, they were with other elephants they may or may not have gotten along with. So basically we listen to the elephants, and then we work with that. We have with our female African elephants, we have actually 2 groups, and that has to do with two elephants that didn't get along. But we're also hoping that's kind of interesting because one elephant was captive born. All the other elephants, the wild born ones, just they kind of naturally they know what to do. And the captive born elephant had a little harder, but she's actually been paired now with Mara, who's our longest, who's been at the sanctuary the longest, and she was following Mara around like a puppy. So we think that what we're hoping is that that this captive born elephantica will get more comfortable, and that and she's also learning from Mara. So she's learning how to be social. And then at one point it would be nice if we could have everyone all back together again. But again, we're under no pressure though, and they're under no pressure. If it doesn't work out that way and that's not what they want, then we'll just keep things as they are. So
yeah, that's great. Noelle, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the species and how they're naturally living in the wild. For example, our tigers normally don't want to be with anybody else because they would be solitary in the wild, so we respect that. Our non-human primates are very social, but we find the biggest challenges between the ones that were raised as pets. They have not learned the social cues, and they are often more difficult to pair with the primates retired from biomedical research because they were either housed with each other or never were socialized around humans. So that can be challenging as well too. But it just depends. We've got American bison who like to chase each other, and then they establish a hierarchy really quickly. Pigs are actually the more difficult species to introduce because they do have a very structured hierarchy, and they usually have to beat each other up before they accept each other. So we do have a very structured introduction process that we follow for each of the different species.
Yes. And I think the key is follow the lead of the animals, the individuals, to tell you what works for them. In our sanctuary, for instance, we will have beluga whales and perhaps orcas. They will be in separate areas. And in terms of the beluga whales, for instance, if we're going to have 6 or 8 of them, we hope that they form some kind of a group. But if they don't, we have to be prepared to, again, follow their lead, maybe have different compartments so that some could live in some areas that the others are not. The idea is to give them enough space so that if they don't want to be with another whale, they don't have to be. But if they do, they will. And I think one of the things that leads me to is this notion of autonomy. That is so important for animals. That is not a physical thing; it is a mental thing. Is the autonomy, the ability to choose how you spend your day. And I think that that's one of the guiding principles of an authentic sanctuary: is to the best of your ability, give these individuals the chance to do what they want to do for the first time in their life. So I think that's really important. I have another question here, very interesting, from Laura. She says, do these animals usually go back to their natural ways after you rescue them? So that's a very complex question, right?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it depends on the species. Like I was saying with the primates, sometimes the monkeys can adapt. Sometimes they are challenged. I would say primarily they go back to being less interested in people, which is a good thing. Because a lot of times with our monkey owners, they'll want to come out and see their monkey because they have this bond with this animal that nobody else could ever possibly have. And so we'll let them come out to see the animal in their new habitat with their new family. And it's always very rewarding for me when that monkey pays absolutely no attention to that former owner. And then the owner gets their feelings hurt and then doesn't come back. But it's what's best for the animal.
I mean, I think that's the key, is it's not about us, right? It's about the animals. And I think one of the things I'd like to follow up on is this notion of thriving or flourishing, actually. To me, I've always found that to be a critical component of sanctuaries is giving the sanctuary residents an opportunity to flourish, not just survive, not just make it or eke out an existence, but to flourish. What does that mean to you, to both of you, in terms of the animals that you have at your sanctuaries?
I think, flourishing, well, again, I have to go back to this idea that, one of the first kind of signs for us too, that an animal is, kind of is flourishing, I would say, is that they are able to relax. And I think it's really important. For example, with our elephants, they can lay down in the afternoon and take a nap. And that's something, I've never, ever anywhere else seen an elephant lay down. They do lay down to sleep, which maybe some people don't know, but they do actually lay down to sleep and overnight as well. And I think that's one really important sign. Also, I would maybe social behaviors too, that they've, been able to, I don't know, just like find their place in the group. And with Toka, Maggie, and Lou, it was seamless with them when we brought in Toka with those. And of course, for elephants, being social is important. So yeah, I think those are some, I'm sure you can get into like physiological signs of flourishing, but to me, it's more, seeing an interest in their environment maybe is another thing too, that they're active and, you're talking about autonomy and they are making these choices in their environment, whether it's, where they're going, who they're spending time with, or even, I do a lot of elephant observations and I'm just fascinated just when they're eating. They'll pick a area of grass and they don't just pick any piece of grass. They're very selective about what they're eating. So that's something I can watch all day long. But but yeah, so to me those are kind of the signs that more, I guess it would be more of like a psychological health is what I would look at.
Exactly. Noelle?
Yeah, I think, what Catherine said is exactly right. When you see them exhibiting normal behavior and they're in their new family group that they would be in the wild, and when they pay no attention to you, I think is another sign too, because, the monkeys coming out of labs are very hypersensitive to humans. They've been poked and prodded and had, testing done. And so when they come in, you are obviously the enemy. And when they have enough space that they can just walk away from you and ignore you, I think that's a good sign too.
Yeah, I think this notion of thriving and autonomy really comes into play in terms of just the ability to disperse, right? So we see this a lot in dolphins and whales, in concrete tanks. When there are conflicts, there's nowhere to go. And when there's nowhere to go, where the natural dispersal mechanisms would come into play in the ocean, that causes hyperaggression and often with really bad consequences. So it's just an example of how, something like dispersal, just being able to get away when you need to is critical. And we all know why that's important, and it's important for other animals as well. We have an interesting question here. What do you do to monitor whether the animals in your sanctuary are doing well? What does that look like? It's a critical question, right? So what are the things that you do that actually tell you that they're doing better in a sanctuary than not? Or that they aren't? What are some of those things?
I can
go ahead. No, go ahead, Catherine.
I can volunteer like Maggie's story, the elephant, the only elephant in Alaska. One of the arguments against moving her was that she was not a social elephant. She had actually at one point been with another elephant in this small enclosure, and I guess they didn't get along then. No surprise, right? So, and then that elephant had passed away, but so they said that she would never get along with other elephants. She could, wouldn't do well at a sanctuary, and she's our most social elephant. So there you go. So that's how we tell Maggie was doing well. And there's other stories too. Just, I mean, I think that there's many stories. I'll give you that one, but there are definitely many stories that show there has been definitely both a psychological change, social changes, all for the better. So.
And it doesn't happen right away. It's not like an animal comes into the sanctuary and the next day all their stereotypies disappear, all their anxieties and fears disappear. It's not an overnight thing. It's correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. And it depends on the individual. We've had animals that just giving them a lot of space, and every animal on our sanctuary has the ability to get away or to hide if they want to 24/7. They're never forced to be on exhibit or anything like that. So giving them a lot of space, giving them the ability to hide. But then we've also had some, animals that giving them too much space too quickly was too traumatic. We had a tiger like that. So he had lived in a shipping crate for goodness knows how long. So we slowly gave him more space, and he defined how much space he wanted based on the fact that, we gave him an eighth of an acre, and then we gave him a half of an acre, and then gave him 3 acres, and he never went into the 3-acre yard. So we backed off and, based it on his reaction. So it's just observation. Our staff are trained professionals. They are trained in specifically the animals they work with, and I think they just have learned through working with these animals the signs that show what they're comfortable with and what they're not.
Right, and just being sensitive to what they're telling you and not going with what you assume needs to be the case, that, the more space, the more they'll take, or the more they want, for instance, immediately. It, like you said, I mean, it means being sensitive to what the animal has gone through, what the individual has gone through, what they're used to, what they're telling you in terms of their behavior and their health, and trying to help them adjust, but doing it on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's extremely important. And in a sanctuary, you have the luxury of doing that because you don't have to worry about them being on display. You don't have to worry about all those kinds of things. So if you want to stay in the med pool a little while longer because we feel you're not ready, fine. And then we'll give you a little bit more space and so on and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that allow you to be responsive to their psychology. Why are sanctuaries so against breeding?
That's easy. Because
That's
there's
an
so
easy
many.
one, but let's
Yeah.
say it anyway.
There's so many out there, so many animals out there that need places to go, and there's not enough reputable sanctuaries. I probably get a couple dozen requests every week to take in animals, whether that's horses, donkeys, pigs, monkeys, you name it. And most of them I have to turn down because we're always at capacity. And reputable sanctuaries will limit the amount of animals they can take because they're responsible enough to say, I don't have space, I'm not going to overcrowd habitats, I'm not going to take in more animals than I can financially afford. And so they either get euthanized or they go to substandard facilities that will take in whoever and put them in tiny habitats and cram them together. So that's why we don't breed.
And certainly in a lot of the facilities that do exist, if you're talking about your larger charismatic megafauna, there just aren't the conditions that they need. We can't, fulfill their needs right now. Let's put it this way, if there are animals that even in a sanctuary, we can't, fulfill their needs, then, how do you think that can be done at a facility that doesn't have, the environment that we do? So, and why would you want to be bringing more animals to live in these, in these conditions that, like I said, just don't satisfy their very complex needs?
Right, and I think, go ahead. Please.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and part of the way that we've kind of helped to try to get as many animals placed is through BCSA, through NAPSA, and through our Bear Alliance. We will network with each other to say, I got a request to take in 5 bobcats. I don't have space. Does anybody else out there? And then that way there's a better chance that that animal will get placed as opposed to just letting the person try to find somebody that's reputable. So that has helped as well too with getting more animals placed. But it's still a question of there's not enough space for everybody that needs sanctuary.
I think these practical considerations are really key. And then there's also the more overriding issue of why we have sanctuaries, right? We have them because we have animals in captivity in places where they shouldn't be.
Mhm.
They should be living their lives out in the free-ranging environment. But these individuals have already been put in captivity, and they can't just be dumped back into the jungle or the ocean or this or that. So what do you do with that? And the question then becomes, okay, you move them into a different form of captivity in the name of sanctuary that has a qualitatively different, uh, gives them a different opportunity to thrive. So it's orders of magnitude better for them than being in a cage or a concrete tank. But the last thing we want to do is create more captive animals, more captive wildlife, right? That's the way I look at it. I don't want there to be captive orcas or beluga whales or dolphins or elephants in the future. Uh, we have to, phase that out because they don't belong in captivity. So the last thing we want to do is contribute to creating more individuals who are captive, even if they live in a sanctuary. That's our viewpoint. And okay, here's a good one from Galit Newman. If I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. The question is, how much interaction do you actually have with the animals at the sanctuary? What services do you provide to them? Food, cleaning, medical services, etc. That's a good question. What does that look like?
I'll go first, if that's okay. For us, it depends on the species. Obviously, our domesticated animals may want more interaction from us, our pigs or our cows or horses, definitely. But we base it on what they want. We have a lot of feral horses that were from Bureau of Land Management roundups of wild Mustangs, and they want nothing to do with us. We put them on an 800-acre pasture and let them free roam. We have horses that were rescued from slaughter. They were obviously somebody's pet, and they just want to be groomed, and so we do that for them. We base it off of their reaction. But wildlife, we never go in with. We never touch them. We never handle them. We have very strict protected contact rules, as does any reputable facility. And then as far as services, we have a veterinarian, 2 veterinarians on staff, vet tech, we have trained animal care staff, we have a full team of facilities. Since we're on, and Catherine, you guys are on so much property as well too, it takes a lot of people to keep up that much land. And so we have a staff of about 25 people, and then we rely heavily on volunteers. We have an intern program as well.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I think, kind of back to the question of like other, captive facilities. I mean, we're captivity. We still have to manage, the animals. We still, we have to feed them. We have to monitor their health. We have to provide veterinary care. So, in that way, like I said, back to the discussion of like, say, our relationships with zoos, for example. In fact, I spoke at one conference where I think people were kind of surprised, to hear, from the zoo side, because I think there's a lot of mystery. They kind of don't know what sanctuaries do, and maybe there's some misunderstandings. But really, I mean, we share so much in common when it comes to the care of the animals, for
Yes.
sure. So that's not going to be all that different. But yeah, so it's husbandry, veterinary care. It's also, I think it's Noelle mentioned earlier, it's knowing these animals too. So you're going to pick up, and their caregivers are going to be able to pick up on cues to determine, their health or their mood. And yeah.
A lot of it looks on a day-to-day basis. In some ways, a lot of it overlaps with what happens in zoos and aquariums, what they call human care, right? So is there veterinary service? Yes. Will you feed the animals? Yes. Is there husbandry? Yes. do you maintain the property? You know, whether it's cleaning the nets regularly or the grounds. Yes. So it's got all of those elements because it is still a captive environment and one that, you know, needs to be maintained. And these animals, you know, some of them don't even know, you know, how to feed on their own. So a lot of times, I mean, this is, you know, a lot of the same elements, but what it has is an additional set of elements that provide an opportunity for a thriving that may not have existed before. So yes, the animals are still being fed. They are still, there may be environmental enrichment techniques that have to be employed. But again, all with the aim of the animal's well-being as the priority. And the other thing is too is that if I mentioned, you know, in terms of visitors as well, right? So, you know, in most of the time, if you go to a marine park or a zoo, a visitor's kind of guaranteed to see an animal. But in a sanctuary, that's not necessarily the case, right? Because they may not want to be, I mean, you'll see them from a distance. They may be under the water or behind a tree or over a hill. And that's the way it should be. So you're not guaranteed really anything except to see an animal, see a situation set up to prioritize the animal's well-being. Whether you see the animal or not is another story, right?
We have a college outreach program. That's something I grappled with, and was that because we bring in professors bring their classes, and we didn't want. We were just grappling with the idea of like looking at animals, basically gazing at animals, looking at animals, you know, and then being on display. So we really kind of looked at ways to kind of break that down, if you will. So, you know, one thing that we do talk, well, we never guarantee in this program that pretty much you're going to see an elephant, they're hard to miss, but you know, you're not guaranteed to see a bear, you're not guaranteed to see a tiger or a lion. So, and also we're not going to do anything to entice the animals to come closer. Like, you know, like you were saying, they can be over on a hill, they're going to be where they are. And also it was the idea that we really try to impress upon people that what you're coming here to do is observe, you know, them in their homes, you know, how they're living here. Another thing we do is we kind of talk about the perception that people, I mean, that's a big part of the program is the human perception of captive wildlife. Like when they're in a cage, how that changes like the differential. So for example, we talk about, you know, we can be, you know, maybe 10 feet away from the tiger's cage, but then we talk about, you know, and you know, your perception of the animal in the cage, but what if the cage wasn't there? How does that change your perception of that animal? And obviously, yeah, there's a big perception change, but certainly, yeah, that is something, like I said, that we really grappled with in the program is, you know, and not letting people kind of fall back into that ease of just, you know, seeing an animal on display. I mean, you know, we really, you know, like I said, we really talk a lot about the animal's experience and also, again, you know, in perception that's created when they are, you know, caged and when they are separate from us. And we even bring that even beyond to how that would affect how we see wildlife. You know, we see free living animals as well. How do these perceptions carry over and distort how we see wildlife?
A lot of the sanctuaries are not just about the animals, it's about changing human psychology.
Yes.
And expectations, perceptions, which then change, hopefully, how we treat other animals. So, I mean, you spoke to that beautifully. Noelle, you have something to add to that?
No, I think Catherine summed it up perfectly.
Thank you.
I agree.
Well, we are pretty much out of time at this point. We will be posting the recording of this and sharing it, but we will also try to answer as many questions offline as we can because all of your questions are really important and I like to get to them and hopefully our panelists might be able to take a look at them and respond to some. I really want to thank you for joining us for another live webinar. And Mel, this has been such a pleasure learning from you and sharing ideas with you. And I'm very grateful that you had a chance to spend some time with us. So thank you very, very much. And everyone stay safe.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.